Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this debate between black men who don't want the community to remain as in bad and as traumatized a shape as it is, oftentimes we debate, we either ask or we debate the point. Do we just let Blackistan burn the embers and wither away and go extinct? Do we try to save it? And some people accuse the educated lames of saying let Blackistan burn, and some people accuse so-called Pookies and Ray Rays of being too loyal, trying to save it while at the same time ruining it. And of course the truth is much more complex than that. But there is, and hell, even the terms are not very accurate. But the answer to the problem is both. And I'm going to explain how the answer to the problem could be both in the first place. How you going to burn Blackistan down or let it burn and try to save it? It's similar to what happens when somebody is drowning. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I can find some solution for black people other than Islam. I can't. No, Christianity's not going to save us. No, Judaism ain't going to save us. But then again, no, ancestor worship ain't going to save us. Because if you think about it, two of them were able to be used to enslave black folks. Ancestor worship did not summon the spirits of the ancestors in a form in which they could have defeated these demons that kidnapped our ancestors. And our ancestors did not ask to be worshipped. So if we could not expect them to do certain things when they were alive, calling on their own ancestors, how can we expect them to do certain things when they're dead? Yet and still, truth be told, it's a lie when people say that Islam was a conquering force in Africa. In actuality, Islam was a conquering force when Africans used it. It was not a conquering force when Arabs tried it. They tried in North Africa. They eventually were able to somewhat conquer it, but in actuality, we can't even say that they did it. The Arabs weren't able to actually conquer the Moors. They oppressed the Moors, but they did not truly conquer them. It took generations for them to even get the Berbers to listen to Islam. When the Berbers accepted Islam, there wasn't a need to fight anymore, but the Arabs still couldn't treat them fairly, and the Berbers revolted. And the Arabs had to call in for many reinforcements. If the Berbers had been more in number, the Arabs would have never won against them. Islam spread into tropical Africa by way of trade. I'm not going to say more about that. That's enough right there. What I'm simply saying is I can't sit up and endorse some other religion or spiritual way because, in all honesty, that's another history lesson. But they haven't worked. Islam had to be abandoned. And see, other ways of life, you could adhere to them and they don't fix something. In order for you to go through some really bad stuff like what our community is going through, you got to not be Muslim. Or you got to not practice it. That's the truth of the matter. And I've said before that Arabs are going through a lot of ill stuff because they're not practicing their religion. But I would say this, though. How do you burn and save Blackistan at the same time? It's similar to when somebody is drowning. When somebody is drowning, you can go and save them on the condition that you either grab them and snatch them from behind or you knock them unconscious so that they don't resist as you bring them to the surface. Or you can simply bring something to them that is so buoyant that when they do grab onto it, they stay at the surface level. But they don't drag you down. You give them something so buoyant they can't drag it down. It drags them up. Human beings are not that buoyant. So there are right and wrong ways. There are right and wrong ways to save a drowning person. The wrong way will cause the rescuer and the drowner to drown. It is a similar situation here. In order to get you to a point where you could look for yourself and see how Islam would or would not work and how anything else would or would not work and not take my word for it, you must first get out of the drowning phase. In order to do that, you have to get rid of dead weight. And Blackistan's dead weight, or even counterweight, Blackistan's drowning weight, that which causes the sinking, has to be referred to. It has to be identified, referred to, and separated and left behind. First, you need a term and a criteria by which to define them. The criteria would be simple. You need a criteria actually by which to separate them from everybody else. You need a term by which to define them. And here's the term: IDNS. You can't use ID because that could be confused for identification. And in this case, ID means intentionally dysfunctional. IDNS means intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotypes. You can combine nigger with negative and understand the term negative. Intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotypes. We've had people try to come up with many different terms. My son was a teenager and he tried to come up with it because he realized that there was an element of the black student body at his middle school that was against studying and learning and thinking. They were against it. And people listened to them. They realized that there was an element of the black student body that was fine with it. But the problem was that when the black student body got together, when enough black students were in one place, the worst influences won out. And the same thing happened with whites. Nobody wanted to remove the IDNS element from them. No one wanted to identify it, say that it was intentionally dysfunctional, look down on it, and separate it from itself. Well, now we can understand who and what that must mean. Intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotypes. Some of you are going to argue over where we draw the line. That's a different story, and I'm going to answer that now in the second half. We know that there's a part of the community that causes the rest to sink. We know that you can find them in the hood, and you can even find them in black suburbs. Cascade, Prince George's County, Maryland, Stonecrest, Ben Hill. You know where to find them. You know that you can find them, and you know where to find them. In order for the community to save itself, you're going to have to get rid of the elitist, not the ones who say that we can do better, not the behavioral elitists per se. You're going to have to get rid of the ones who believe that most of our people are inferior, but that he or she, himself or herself, is better and superior. The ones who believe that we just need to do and act more like white folks. You got to get rid of them. And then you got to get rid of the ones that believe that we're supposed to act like the negative stereotypes on TV, and that's really who we are, and we shouldn't be anything else. Now, there's one thing that will get rid of both. That thing that will get rid of both is repatriation. When you introduce repatriation to black folks, if it is an elitist or if it is just a down and just a gutter nigger, whichever one, both of them are going to hear you talk about repatriation to other countries in the continent of Africa and outside of Africa. Not all to the same place, of course, but they're going to hear you mention repatriation for black people as a solution, and they're stuck on the plantation. It could be a gutter nigga that's stuck on a hood. And it could also be an elitist that's just stuck on America in general, but they're stuck on this plantation. They don't think that black folks going somewhere else and adapting to a new environment is worth anything. The reality is, it's one of the best things I've done. I wake up and I never regret that I left America, that I left the plantation. I got to go to work today. We work Sunday through Thursday. And honestly, I'm looking forward to going into work. I don't like invigilating tests per se, but I can say that my job is never boring. I can say that I'm safe here as a black man. I'm well paid for the work that I do. My skill is valuable. It may change one day, but right now it's valuable. I can also say that no cop is going to shoot me. I'm worried about the traffic on the way to my job. I'm not worried about the job itself. I'm not worried about the police on the way to my job. I'm also not worried about the depression that comes from having discussions with elitist niggas in the U.S. that think that plantation America is the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm not worried about the depression that comes from the gutter niggas that just weigh the community down and hold it back because they stuck on hood stuff like the Eric Holders among us. Where I am now, I might have to deal with dysfunctional Bedouin Arabs, but that's another group of people. And hey, look, if they want to be that way, let them suffer the consequences. Fact is, they're going to need someone to save their country, and they're going to have to pay buckets of money to do it, and that could be us. So anyway, at the end of the day, the point is we got to separate ourselves from a particular element that's bad for us. And in order to do that, guess what we have to do? We got to introduce repatriation and look into it. And if you go into the hood and you see some dude that's hustling, but he does not balk at the idea of repatriation, that's not a gutter nigga. That's somebody who's hustling because he has to. When he gets a way out and wants to go legit, he'll do it. That's not the dead weight or the drowning weight of the community. That's not the downward force making sure that we can never come up and breathe and swim. And if you go into even the suburbs and you mention repatriation, and someone says, I don't know how to live abroad yet, but I go as often as I can. I'd like to set something up abroad so I can live there or retire there. That's not an elitist IDNS. That's not that. You see, at the end of the day, whether it is the elitist or the gutter nigga, both of them believe stereotypes about black people. And those are the ones that have to be weeded out. And one of the best ways to do it is repatriation. I can't think of a better way. If really, what subject can you discuss that's going to divide them from the rest of us so well? And the good thing about it is that they're the ones we don't need in the first place because they're not good no matter where they go. They're not good for any place. I hope that this has been a benefit. Assalamu alaikum.